Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited. We got the return of Gunny, which has been many months since he was here. Jay's returning as well. And then we got Corey on the other side there. Very excited. This is going to be a good one. Now, while I am that excited, y'all should be excited too. Make sure you like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is deep into the evening today. I am excited. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section. We will engage those directly, like this one here from Salty, who put it in a little bit earlier. Good evening, morning all. Jason, Winterstorm, Chris, and all. Sorry I'm missing this one, but it's past my bedtime. I'll catch you later. Have the best of evening. Chris K's jumping in. Hey, Salty, good to hear from you on the road in Palm Springs. So good to see you, buddy. You missed the whole week. And then for some reason, Winterstorm. Good evening.
Evening all.
Good to see you over there. And Patrick Grundle. Good evening, good evening, gents. So we are going to be getting into affirmations and visualization today. But before we do that, let's get some intros out of the way. Gunny, I'm going to start with you. Give it 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff. Go.
Boom. Gunny. Just a airborne entry guy. Retired, went into the sheriff's, the second protection, and now retired, living on the island. Good to go.
Love it. Jay, how about yourself?
Sure. Husband, father, amateur martial artist, and 19 years in the police force, and currently off on medical leave.
Bam. Corey, how about yourself?
Husband and father of two young girls, police officer for 18 years, amateur podcaster. That's about it.
We got lots of skill sets here. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Now, like I said, we're going to be getting into affirmations and visualization. So I'm going to give a definition, and then we're going to go around the table and see what you guys' first thoughts are. So affirmations is the act of affirming or the state of being affirmed. Something declared to be true, a positive statement or judgment. The assertion that the testimony one gives is true and equivalent to that which would be given while under oath. Now, and then visualizations are the formation of mental visual images, the act or process of interpreting in visual terms or putting into visible form, and the process of making an internal organ or part visible by the introduction of a radio opaque substance. So that's that last one's probably not what we're going to be talking about, but definitely something to think about. So when I say affirmations and visualizations, what are your guys' first thoughts? Corey, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
I think it's the idea that if you can't see it up here, you're not going to be able to do it out there. It's manifesting things before they become things. The idea that you're going to positively deal with a situation. You know, in my line of work, for instance, I'm always looking at things, even unconsciously. If this happens, or if I come over here and that happens, this is what's going to happen. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to control the situation. This is how I'm going to positively influence this situation. And we do that in our own lives as well, sometimes less good. And I think we sometimes focus more on the opposite side, which is the negative side of things, the self-destructive talk, things like that, not necessarily the affirmations. But to me, when you say that, that's immediately what sticks into my head.
Yeah, absolutely. Gunny, how about yourself? What are your first thoughts?
Yeah, for affirmation, I'm not good accepting the affirmation. I'm good at pushing it out. And, it comes to being a leader, and it comes to being a good coach. And you should be affirming people's performance, but it has to be true. If, say, they did a half-assed job, I'm not going to say, hey, great job, guys. No, I'm going to say, well, we completed this work, but did we complete it to the best of our ability? So we need to affirm it. And the affirmation as well goes in with the negative, with, how to re-motivate those people with affirmation. Visualization, well, man, that's a huge topic in itself. We get to that a bit more detail with referencing skyhawks and skydiving, shooting. However, visualization in one form is you can visualize what you need to achieve. And basically that's your planning steps and your process of moving forward.
Absolutely. Jay, what are you thinking?
Oh boy. I'm gonna rip off the box, the lid off of Pandora's box with this one. Okay.
We only have an hour show, remember?
Yeah, I know. So on Monday, when you guys were talking about mindset, I started to think about when Shaun said, "What is mind?" and then all of the topics that are associated with this. So, affirmations and visualization. I'm going to step out of what my career has taught me on that and just generalize in a broad spectrum. It seems like if you have control of your mind, that you can almost affect the quantum field, if you will. And so affirmations and visualization, like what Corey said, is almost a way to manifest your surroundings, your environment, and create a proper mindset. I do this on a daily basis, and we can get into that later on. So I want to just tell a quick story about what I mean by this. Most people know what the two slit experiment is. It's basically you shine light at two little slits in a plate, and then light goes through and it creates an interference pattern. And if you block one, light goes through and it just makes a little line like you would assume. If you open them up, you get interference. Humans have been trained in visualization. And when scientists put them in and they literally just visualize which slit the light should go through, there is an actual ability for human beings to affect which slit the photon of light will go through. So it seems like we can actually make affirmations and visualizations that come true in real life. And so that's where my mind went when I saw the poster and it was affirmations and visualization. I was like, oh man, what am I going to talk about? And I wanted to start it off like that because I think it's really powerful that you can literally set your mind by just thinking positively in your own head about the mindset that you want, where you're going. If it's going to be going to the gym, if it's going to be jumping out of an airplane or getting on the battlefield or running everyday life the best that you can be, you can talk yourself into that. So I think that's where I wanted to start it off.
Interesting. Shaun, what are your first thoughts?
I think that the panel has already raised the more well-defined ideas of affirmation and visualization, either as an individual or as a coach, and those things are kind of fundamental to having better performances. But I'm going to get even wilder with the Pandora's box, and I'm going to throw out the thought that comes into my head based on what Jay just stated. I wasn't going to say this, but freaking Jay has freaking started the ball rolling, and so I'm going to let it roll. And so before I knew that the show was going to be affirmations and visualization, I'd put up a post just a bit ago on my Instagram account, and it was 4 images that I created in artificial intelligence, some AI artwork. And those 4 pieces I had crafted a month before I knew we were going to go to Japan. I knew that we were going to go on a vacation. I didn't know that we would end up in Japan. And so the 4 images, as one is a ninja, which I believe I used to be back in the day. And then one was a Ronin that I created, which is how I lived my life after I left the teams. When I went into the civilian world, I walked the world as a Ronin, masterless, following in the footsteps of Miyamoto Musashi. As I was reading his book, I was trying to live that life to better understand me and the world around me, which I didn't understand because I was coming out of a structured world with a master. And then I left that structured world masterless. So I had to find myself in the world, and I had to understand the world by being a Ronin. And then I created a piece, the 3rd artwork, which was an individual in Japan in a rain-swept street with night lighting. And I stylized it after myself with just a little bit of a Japanese hint to it, so it didn't look like I was doing any kind of appropriation, as it were. And so, but that was me on that street, and I lived that moment when I was in Japan just a few days ago. I saw myself in that exact moment, but I'd created the artwork over a month prior. And so the fourth image is of a stylized individual, me, sitting down, studiously considering doing something with a book, writing a book. And so that is now kind of starting to shape up as a high probability. And so the artwork that I created through AI was things that I was creating in my mind that are starting to come into play as the future unfolds in front of me. So does the visualization lead me down the path, or did the path lead me towards the visualization? I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, as I sit here and as I sat on it this morning, when I started to realize that this is what we're going to be talking about, I was unsure as to whether I was going to go full woo-woo or full, out there in the quantum sphere and talk about our lives that unfold in front of us. Who shapes it? Is it us, or is it the universe that shapes it? Is it the visualization of seeing the unknown future in front of us, or the known future in front of us is shaping it unknowingly in our minds? So there's a little bit more Pandora's box for you.
Let's get this going. This is going to be a good conversation. I am excited. We're going to get right into that, and I just want to touch on these really quick before we jump into it. John is on here, evening team. Gunny in the house. Chris K, love Gunny, was typing out what he just answered in business. The kiss of death is thinking nothing can ever go wrong, and it is a sure thing. AARs are very rarely accepted in the civilian world. Now, that is that's a great point, and I'm wondering, to Shaun's question, I'm going to come to you, Corey, here in a second. Creating your world, or is it? Correct me if I'm wrong, Shaun. What you're asking here is, do we create our world, or does the world create our path? Is that the question that you're asking?
I'm not asking a question. I'm simply proposing a thought construct, and we'll see where the thought or the world or the universe or our visualization or this game that we're playing right now, we'll see how it unfolds.
I love it. Corey, coming to you, what are you thinking?
I love this thought process, and as Shaun was talking about it, because I think visualization, making something happen, but then Shaun also saying it's out in the universe. And in my mind, the visualization is one side, the universe and what we want to happen is the other, but one can't attract itself to the other until it has that counterpoint. So it can be out in the universe, and you're like, wow, that'd be wonderful. But until you start visualizing it, until you start doing that visualization, putting it into your head, it recognizes that, the universe recognizes that, your visualization recognizes what's out in the universe, and they attract like magnets to one another. And if the longer you do it, the harder you do it, the more intensely you do it, the more likely those two things are going to come together. That's sort of what I thought when Shaun was talking.
Interesting, Gunny. What about yourself? Where are you coming from? You got to unmute yourself, though. In the program. You got to hit the mute button on the program itself, not on the mic. On the computer. There we go.
There we are. I don't know why that happened.
That was probably me. It's all good. So what are your thoughts?
So I think it's a combination of both. The path and what you visualize makes it happen. It's a twofold game. You really can't just visualize something and make it happen. It's just not going to happen. You have to have that purpose, first of all. You have to have that thought process, and things happen. But that's the path that just leads you to different things. Like, for instance, this Nordic skiing I did with the Paralympians. One thing led to another. We met the top Olympic coach. Then we met the top Olympic athlete. And then from both those, I grabbed some skill sets from those guys and used it on Maddie. So all those things, I think, combine with each other.
I like that. Jay, coming to you. What are you thinking?
Yeah, you had a fella on a couple days ago, and his name was Matt. And he said, does the bug hit the windshield, or does the windshield hit the bug? And when I was listening to that, it kind of rolled into mindset for me. So I think Gunny's right. I think it's a combination of both. So affirmation and visualization are sort of two sides of the same coin. I do this. This is just a personal thing quickly, but I do this in the morning, and I use affirmations and visualization to start my day. I use that to end my day. And when I'm doing anything like in the gym or whatever, I will use the same thing. It seems to me, and I'm going to show you guys a book. I just picked it up. This is like one of those woo-woo science books. Becoming Supernatural. Joe Dispenza is one of those crazy guys that most of the science community thinks a whack job, because he talks about using the mind in order to heal the body. But why does the placebo effect work as good as medication does? Because it seems like if you think it, it occurs. So there's something going on. There's something bigger that we're missing as a whole in society. The mind seems to be the powerhouse of everything. And without sounding so too solipsistic on this, everything seems to be the mind. So if you're able to really grasp what mindset means and use affirmation and visualization in your life, it seems like your mind has connection to the brain and the body in such a way that it will drive you towards a goal. And Gunny's right. You can't think, oh, I want to wake up tomorrow with $10 million in my bank account. Ain't going to happen. That's not how it works. However, if every single day you're like, I want $10 million in my bank account, if you affirm that properly and you visualize how to do that, you'll walk a path towards becoming a millionaire. If you want to get ripped in the gym, and every morning you say to yourself when you wake up, I want to get ripped in the gym, and you visualize that in your head, and you literally create a mindset that that's who you're going to be and that's what you're going to become, you will. I think that's how it works. And I think, and I've said this on my own podcast, and I think I maybe even said this as a guest before, some 30 to 50 trillion cells in your body are listening. And if you're talking negatively, negative affirmation, you're going to get negative outcome. If you're talking positively, you're going to get positive outcome. Every cell's connected in some way. That's what mind, I think, is. Well, one aspect of mind anyways. And so that's seems to be kind of what the soup of the matrix is, Shaun. That there's an interconnectedness, and learning how to have the proper mindset and controlling it with proper affirmation and visualization is what helps to foster and create the future and the present moment that you want.
Yeah, it's funny. I just wrote down thinking versus believing, right? Because I think that's the crux of where you're getting at there, is that you can think anything you want, but if you actually believe that it's going to happen, then time is of no factor, which I think is a really interesting concept. Shaun, coming to you next. What are you thinking on this?
Well, I'll, I don't want to stir things up too much. I don't want to take us off on too tangentially a subject, but I'll say this, that I'm not a big affirmation guy, and that doesn't make me a bad guy. That just makes me a guy who doesn't do daily affirmations. It's not my jam. And here's why it's not my jam. It could work for me. I don't know. It could make me a better person, maybe. But how I've tried to live my life is let it unfold in front of me. Like, I try to get to work and then it unfolds. Now, maybe it's taken me longer to get to where I'll end up being. I don't know. But here's my perspective on it. I think for me, affirmations would constrain me, in the sense of, by stating a particular thing, it's not that I'm going to be dogmatic about it. It means that I'm now on a specific trajectory of that affirmation. And even if I make it a broad affirmation, it will be to a degree where it now kind of locks me in a particular trajectory that I don't actually like. I like a massive battle space in front of me. In fact, I like the battle space all around me. And so rather than having an affirmation or a direction or a particular trajectory, sometimes I just like to do and let it unfold. And sometimes it's not ideal, but through the non-idealized, non-affirmated sort of trajectory, I find that I learn more in that process. Now, it'll take me a while to figure all of those things out, but for me, it works. So I'm not a daily affirmation guy.
Interesting. Gunny, it looks like you got a thought in your head. What do you got going on?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what Jay said. It's a very good point. The negative feeling, the negative thought, that's detrimental. And also what Shaun is saying, like I never affirm myself either. Like, I'm gonna have a good day. People like me. You remember that sketch? Smiley. I look at affirmation as myself motivating someone else and motivating others. But no, Jay's point about the negative side, that's really interesting. I think we should talk about that because there's a lot of people who think negatively, especially body dysmorphia. That was a problem in the 3rd Battalion when my son was there. My son's a total stud, and they would always be like, I'm such a fat piece of shit, or I'm this. Like, you got to be positive. You're not. Obviously, you're not. You're right. And I think that negativity is gone from that group of people now, and you have to think and speak positively.
Absolutely. There was an interesting experiment a while ago about having plants that were using just positive and negative affirmations and all that stuff. Great little study, but something to look into for sure. Corey, what are you thinking? I saw you come off mute there for a second. What do you got?
Yeah, actually, very much so. I think we're so practiced on speaking the negative in our lives day to day. I think it's reinforced. I think in everything that you look at, social media, the news, everything else, it's always about the negative. And if you're constantly thinking negatively about your own life, your own experiences and things like that, you will find negative things, or more specifically, they'll come and find you. And I'm not talking about something bad happens or it's catastrophic or something and, oh, you somehow willed that into life. But I'm talking about if my mind is set to find bad things, I will find bad things. I will become very good at finding bad things. Not only that, but I will be comfortable after a while finding bad things because that's the expected. The good things don't happen to me, so I don't expect them, so I don't even think about them. Just a thought, anyways.
Yeah, this is a really interesting selection of where we're going to go with this one. Jay, what are you thinking?
To Shaun's point, Shaun, you have been setting yourself up for decades to no longer require affirmation. You said that you started off at 20 years old being literally a nobody. You've called yourself terrible names. In fact, I've heard you multiple times. And then the military built you up and you created yourself into a ninja that kind of ran around in the shadows doing whatever you do. I don't think you require affirmation anymore. You're at an elite status now that it's in the autonomic system. You don't notice it. You don't need to because your body already knows so well that you don't have to do it. The general population and people like me who are learning now, I do, right? I'm still fighting some demons. I'm still battling some things. I'm not looking for sympathy, just saying in order to explain and have context that for me, there are days when depression hits me. And if I'm not reminding myself to have a great day and to ignore all of that negativity, it'll creep in, right? It'll be like a storm on the horizon. And if I don't pay attention to it, all of a sudden it's over top of me. So I visualize and use affirmation in order to chase that away. And I think that it should have maybe clarified that, but you did with your point. And that's why maybe I put my foot in my mouth here, Shaun. But I think that's might be why at your elite level, you don't need to wake up every day. I'm going to be awesome. You have a resume that's like volumes high, whereas a lot of us don't have that resume to back up our autonomic system with, where we're learning to become like that. And so I'm not saying that I'm wrong, you're right, or you're wrong and I'm right. I'm thinking that there's a spectrum of this, and that at some point, maybe in my life, I won't have to wake up every day and remind myself to have a good day because I've done it enough that it's just become commonplace in my mind.
Interesting. So this brings up a great point. I'd written down earlier, ambiguity versus clarity. And Shaun,
So,
what do you got?
well, it's not that I have to retort because it's not a retort. I do have to clarify that Jay is right on point. Now, here's the irony of it. As I was saying that, Jay, it was my imposter syndrome that wouldn't allow me to state what you had just stated clearly and factually and truthfully, because that's where I'm at. because I don't want to flare out and say it out loud and suggest that I'm beyond that, because it sounds weird to say it out loud. But that's how I feel. I'm kind of beyond that. But there was a time in my life when I wasn't. I had to do all of those things. I had to say all those things to myself. I had to like be clear and precise in what trajectory I wanted, with not Saturday Night Live sort of affirmations, but I had to kind of get a grip on the environment that I was in order to perform at the levels that were expected, because I didn't think that I belonged at those levels. So I did have to kind of encourage myself to believe in myself to some degree. But that was then and this is now. And so I'm a different person now. And so I don't have to say those things anymore. But yeah, and there was a time in my life when I kind of had a version of that. But now I just free flow and I let it unfold. And I trust the process that I keep myself in, the process, the path, the way, as I've talked about before. So Jay, you're right on point.
Yeah, this is and this, to my point that I was gonna just about to get into, was the ambiguity versus clarity, is that you have a very clear picture of what you've done and what you're capable of, right? And therefore, what lies in front of you is not really an issue because you've dealt with all kinds of things. Therefore, you have clarity in your ability to do things. Whereas for somebody that has ambiguity in their life, or ambiguity in their thought process, or ambiguity in their own their own status within themselves, that leads to anxiety, depression, all these other things where you have to worry, like, oh my goodness, what am I going to get myself into? That kind of thing. Corey, what are you thinking on this?
Just to touch base a little bit, when I was thinking originally when Shaun was talking about these things, and to touch base on what Jay was saying, I think the difference between Shaun and, say, a regular human being is the fact that when he has something happen to him, he acts on it. There's not a lot of need of visualization in the way that we're talking about. So he acts on it. Something happens, good. All right. And now I'm off doing whatever that is, or now I'm doing whatever I need to do. Whereas somebody, say myself, I might need to visualize something a few times, maybe over a couple of days, to get something going to the point where Shaun takes 10 seconds to go, yeah, that's what I need to do. I'm off doing it. To him, that's his visualization. It's 10 seconds. But for me, it might be 2-3 days. Just a thought.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, absolutely. Gunny, what are you thinking?
Yeah. When it comes to affirmation, again, as I've never had to say to myself, you got this, let's do it. I just execute. But what gets me there is the visualization. And I tell you, I perfected the visualization when we were introduced to it in 1990 on the Skyhawks. And visualizing your 1 minute skydive, you're doing 10 minutes of visualization on the ground, and then it's all the way up to altitude for 45 minutes of visualizing. Anyways, I took that skill and I've used that with everything since, like planning lessons and teaching lessons. That visualization is going on and on and on in my head in order to execute. And I think that's a really important part of the piece.
Absolutely. I think the actions on are the key in this, in anything visualization, because you can think of anything you want, really. You can visualize anything you want, but to actually put it into the world, and this gets back to the beginning of the conversation, is that, what is it that actually creates this thing? Is that, I believe in my mind, it's the actions that you start taking that open up the path. And then you just continually select the right door or select the right path that will take you to where you want to go, as long as your belief remains true. Jay, what are you thinking?
Yeah. So what Gunny just said is something that I'm learning to do. So I'll just use myself as an example. I said it at the very beginning. I started using visualization, and I think visualization is also a spectrum where you can have short-term, acute, present moment visualization when you're doing a task now, and then you can visualize things in the future. So I'm a bit of a gym nut, and I've always been a person that tries to go pretty hard, and I constantly was getting myself injured. So now what I'm doing is that classic thing, like the skier going down the hill, and he's saying to himself, "Don't hit the trees, don't hit the trees." And what do? You hit the trees, right? So an older fellow caught me the other day, and I had to have a laugh because I explained it to him. I'm sitting on the bench with a couple of dumbbells on my knees, and my eyes are closed. And after my set was done, he's, "What are you meditating before you're doing your exercise?" I said, "No, I'm doing a visualization." So what I do is in the gym, I visualize myself doing clean reps. I visualize myself doing the reps, and there's science that backs this up. That there's an actual major increase in performance when you visualize, just like Gunny's saying, you're going to jump out of a plane. You might want to visualize yourself doing that so you don't make any errors, right? So I find myself now over the last year and a half not being injured. I visualize myself doing clean reps. I tell myself as I'm about to start that I've got the power to do it. And it's kind of like that affirmation thing that Shaun's saying, but it works. Short-term, acute, present moment visualizations seem to keep you right in the proper mindset to get you to do the task properly without any forethought or without any aforethought. You don't have to think about it once you've done it because you just did it in your head already.
Interesting. Shaun, I'm coming back to you now. What are you thinking about?
On the visualization aspect, so 1989, I was on the Skyhawks, and it wasn't a taught thing. The visualization in 89 was not a taught module. I just happened to notice a guy called Michel Denis doing it as we were going up to altitude, and he was had his eyes closed. He's doing his thing, and I got a critical eye. I watch the world around me. I like to pay attention to detail. I'm curious, and so I saw him doing it. I was like, "What is that dude even doing?" So I watched him for, I don't know, just a few seconds, and I thought, "Oh, I see what he's doing now. Eyes closed. He's running the drill." And so he was doing some visualization, an early form of it, certainly the earliest form of visualization that I ever saw. And I freaking copycatted him. And so from that point on, I visualized every single jump, every single move in the air, every single emergency drill. I visualized everything, multiple iterations all the way up to altitude. I'm glad that it got formalized in 1990. That's freaking awesome. But that early introduction, I'm going to tie this into something here that also involves Tim in a sec. That early introduction was the inception for me of understanding visualization. I carried that on through my rest of my military career, right up into tier 1, where before we were going to do a door kick, I'd do an insane amount of split-second iterations because I'd been visualizing so long. I could do an iterative loop like 10 in the speed of that. And I could see all of the A, B's, and C's, all of the if this, then that's, all of the good, bad, and the uglies. I could rip off a pile of iterative loops of visualization as I was reaching for something. I could predict the future as the future was about to unfold in front of me. I could see everything that might happen in that room before I went into the room because I'd just done it so much. I was so refined in the process. I called it folding time and space in my mind. That's what I categorized it as. But if you don't keep doing that, then it starts to fade as a skill set. It starts to collapse on itself. It's not as tight an iterative loop. It's not as fast a loop. It's not as precise a loop. You're not as good at predicting the future if you don't do your homework. So you can't like start visualizing and think, "Oh, now I'm a visualizer." Well, you're some form of a visualizer, but you're not the best version of yourself as a visualizer. So now I've explained visualization to 24-hour world champions as such that before you go to bed, you're going to do 2 or 10 full iterations of that course. As you're visualizing it, you're going to smell the air. You're going to hear the wind. You're going to feel it on your face. You're going to employ all of your sensory aspects to visualize. And then as I started to get out of the game, I started losing my visualization aspect. Not that it disappeared, it's just that I wasn't doing it as much. And it was the first Operation Pegasus jump where Tim was my instructor, and he was having us run through the skills and drills, all of the emergency stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, I've kind of let my visualization slip. I haven't been running the iterations in my mind for these kind of things for a little while now. I need to get back in that game and tighten up my visualization loops. And so over the course of OpPeg 1 and OpPeg 2, it was really reinforced to me that, man, you're never so good at the game that you can just stop playing the game of visualization. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. This is this is such a deep subject. I love it. I'm going to come to you, Gunny, here in a second. The question I guess that I have for everybody, but specifically for Gunny, because you've been running Pegasus Jump and you've been running people through jump camps and all that stuff for a little while now. I remember you teaching us visualization on the course, right? Or as we went through it. And I guess, what is your opinion on what you've seen from, say, the average person versus somebody that has been through some sort of formal training? Because I remember being taught visualization while I was in the military. I don't know about the police sector, but I know for the military guys, we got taught it. Is there that big of a difference between like the average person who comes to get a jump in and then versus somebody that's been through a couple of things? If that makes sense, what are you thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Someone that's been in that stressful environment of some kind before will absolutely take this skill set and make it better. Along with the visualization. If you haven't been introduced to visualization, your first time you're doing it, it's like meditating. Can you totally relax and meditate? Visualization does take some practice in order to really get it down and execute and shut your mind off. And as you said, Chance, like getting military guys out for the jump, they definitely, they've been through stressful things in their lives, and the first responders. So yeah, they take it a lot better than, say, a civilian student. Yeah, it's a lot more repetition. So with visualization, also you saving your time on actual physical repetitions and running stuff through your mind.
Absolutely. Corey, what about yourself? Coming in from the police realm, did you get this as well? Same kind of training?
Not as extensive, no. And it was something that you really had to sort of seek out yourself. If you surrounded yourself with people who were already in the game, then they sort of brought you under their wing and taught you. And then the responsibility you have is to then bring that out. There is formalized training, but it's more it's not necessarily your frontline people, at least for us. I know people have developed it over time. Just they might not call it visualization, but I've been across from somebody in a door and we're about to breach a door, and I look over and they've got their eyes closed for a couple seconds, and when they open it up, it's pure focus. You can see they've done something, they've figured something out, they've visualized what's going to happen going in, and they've accepted it. This is what we're going to do. This is the action we're going to do. This is the result that we want. And it only takes a couple of seconds. It doesn't have to be an iteration after iteration after iteration for minutes on end. It's something that just with the clarity of thought and the focus of vision that they're able to do very quickly.
That's interesting. Jay, how about yourself? What are you thinking from your perspective?
Yeah, so I started martial arts when I was 8 years old, and I got lucky that my Taekwondo master was really big on visualization. So after we would learn a specific one step or finally finish learning a kata, we would have to visualize it. So what we would do is we would sit in class in meditative practice and we would visualize the one steps and the forms. And without polishing my own brass too much here, I got pretty good at it. And I was able to take that into the international tournament circus. And what I found was, and you guys will probably all be able to relate to this in some way, if you get good at it, time stops. Mm-hmm. For a moment when you're in a situation, you can almost kind of look around and think, okay, if the guy turns his hips towards me and brings his knee up, I know that there's a specific kick coming. If I start to see that he's raising his lower leg up in this way, it's probably a roundhouse kick. And in this way, when I learned how to visualize, because my master, he was really big on it. Every day in class, we'd have to do about 15 minutes of it. I got pretty good at predicting what my opponents were going to do, and I won a lot of tournaments that way. And so I was able, Corey's right, in the policing world, there's not really like a visualization class. When you go to block training annually, they don't sit you down and teach you that. But if you've got it as a skill, you can really master it. So the radio goes off, you got a stabbing, or you've got a guy who's holding people up and person's got a weapon, and you're on your way to the call, and your brain immediately starts going, okay, if this, then that, right? If I get in the door and I see a knife, what do I do? And you can kind of chop the scenario up into various avenues that might occur, so that when you get there, you're not really surprised. It's just like, it's like multiple choice. Okay, this is what I see, that's D. That's what I see, that's A. And in that way, visualization kind of really allows you to slow down the moment so that you can see it and think very clearly. it is, like Gunny said, it takes a lot of practice. And if you don't know how to do it, you really have to work. There's an effort that is involved, but I think it's a worthwhile effort. And there's really a massive body of psychology that speaks to this. I mean, the prefrontal cortex is a visualization center. We look into the future and try to find out what the future will be. And that's kind of what visualization is.
Absolutely. This there's so many great points here. I just want to hit on these couple little comments here. Vanessa jumped in here, said, "Can't go to bed now that Jason's pulled out the dispensa." And Karen Turner said, "Zen, the ancient art of meditation, visualization used in sports and fighting. I didn't really understand it until I watched a race car driver run the track in his mind." And that brings up a great point. There's a reel going around Instagram right now, and it's got I think it's one of the Blue Angels who's in his flight suit, and you can see him like walking through it with his eyes closed, running all the controls and doing his entire pattern, just walking around the tarmac in front of his plane. And it is really powerful, really useful. Shaun, you got any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, but you know why it's getting a lot of plays is because he looks tight in that flight suit. He looks like he's large and in charge. But guess what? He's no different than any other freaking person that I've worked with as a coach. Or he's no different than Jay at 8 years old. He's no different than anyone who's been formally trained in the process. The process is the process. You don't need a flight suit to be impressive. What you need to be impressive is get in the game of doing it. As Jay said, our prefrontal cortex, or PFC, is a predictive modeling mechanism. It's a tool that predicts the future, and it predicts the future based on patterns. And if you've run enough patterns in your life and you've run enough patterns inside your mind, you combine the real world with the world that you develop in your head through iterative predictive modeling, if this, then that's. Well, what you've got is a massive playbook at your full disposal in real time. But more correctly, if you're really good at it, you've got a massive playbook that predicts the future that's in front of the now. And so how far into the future can you predict? Well, it depends on how long you've been doing it, baby. And if you don't know what we're talking about right now, this is all going to be woo-woo. That if you've been in the game long enough of predictive modeling, of observing patterns, of glassing someone with a 10-power optic for day after day after day, you know when they're going to turn left before they know when they're going to turn left. And that's just the way it is. And you can either believe it or not. But the only way to understand whether it's true or not is to get to work on using this amazing mechanism in the front of our melon called the future predictor. But you got to get to work to make it work.
And I think I'm going to ask you guys this question, but in my mind, the key to making it work is to work, to actually not just visualize something, but then to put it in action, right? Like if I want to work my drills, I gotta run through the images in my head. Okay, I need to do this, and I move my hands where I need to move them. But then I need to actually pick up a rifle and work the drills as well to make that connection between the physical realm and the imagined realm, or the predictive realm, I should say. Gunny, what are you thinking on this?
Yeah, first off, I think it's interesting what Jay hit on, not the last session, but the one prior, same with Shaun. Both basically came in with COAs, courses of action, in your visualization. If something's happening, you can immediately put 3 or 4 COAs in your head of how to counteract that or how to improve that. So I thought that was interesting that you both touched that. And I don't think maybe you guys didn't even realize you both hit those things on the COA. Another thing Jay said there about the visualization with you get into that point where you're almost, it's just there. And we call that being in the bubble, where you've tuned everything out and you're just thinking, or you're just executing that task, right? And that is a hard thing to get into. I've truly been in the bubble maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, and I can picture them all. And I've been almost there most of the time, but I've only been there 3 or 4 times, getting in that bubble where I've tuned everything out. I've tuned all the noise out. And the most extreme case I can tell you is in combat. We were doing a company right flanking. We were bogged down. I had a whole platoon of Afghan National Army run away. So that stopped our right flanking. I was controlling fire base, no comms. Comms are down, and I have to get the battle captain up to pound some rounds through a concrete wall. So I look to my right. I'm checking what's going on this flank, and I'm looking at the beaten zone where the rounds are falling, and this open field was the only place I could get the vehicle into. So I ran that way. I visualized not getting hit by bullets, believe it or not. And I was in the bubble. I just went, did it, and I stood in this open field waving up the LAV captain, brought him up, and rounds are bouncing off the vehicle. But I didn't know this until after the battle when we AAR'd it, and the troops are like, holy crap, Sergeant Major, that was really cool how you're in the open field and rounds were bouncing off the vehicle and by your feet. And I'm like, I don't remember a thing. And then I ran back to where I was supposed to be. So that was one of the times in an extreme situation where I totally tuned everything out because it had to be done.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes your brain will take over at some point, right? And you'll just start working. Jay, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, going back to the psychology, especially in performance athletics, a rep visualized in the mind is the same as a rep performed. The difference is that your body won't have like the little micro tears in your muscle to grow the muscle or to increase your VO2 max or whatever. But the mind doesn't know the difference. Anything that you visualize in the mind feels like reality to the mind. So that's why it's so important to do the visualization, like Gunny's saying. You're right, too. I completely agree. With all of the things that we're talking about, getting into that space where time dilation sort of changes and you almost like look around and everything's frozen. I too have only been there a few times. And the funniest part is one of the best times that happened, I wasn't even on duty. It was 4 or 5 months ago in the summer. I was cutting grass at my in-laws and a couple of OPP guys tried to taser a bad dude out in front of my in-laws' house. I was oblivious at first. Bad guy came running around the corner into the yard and it was just the same thing. I just kind of took a fighting stance and it was like all of the scenario that could happen was laid out before me. I didn't hear a whisper of anything. And all of a sudden the guy was in front of me and I gave him a judo throw right into the garage, knocked him out cold, and the cops came and arrested him. And when it was all done, I thought, holy shit. Sorry, pardon my language. Holy crap. That just happened. And yeah, it's rare that it happens. I think the moment has to be really intense, but you also have to be very well trained and have done it many, many times.
Yeah, absolutely. This is this is a challenge when we get into this stuff, and I really wanted to touch base back on. We've talked about visualization quite a bit, but I think there's more to be said in the affirmation realm here, and I just want to touch back on something you guys were talking about earlier, in that even the visualization portion of this is a extended model of affirmations in and of itself, right? To say that you're capable of doing something and then running through the process in your own head it's basically an affirmation to begin with. So it's almost the same, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on this in terms of, okay, Shaun, what do you got?
Well, it can be. So we have to watch our language. It's a possibility. It's not an is. And so, and I'm going to also check a little bit more language, not because I'm being pedantic, just because I don't want any misunderstandings out there. When we're doing visualization or iterative loops in our mind, it's creating neuroplasticity formation, or it's creating neuronal links, or it's creating pathways within the brain. So our brains aren't doing our brains are doing the connective work, but our minds are doing the visualization work. So through visualization in our mind's eye, we're creating links within our brain. And so it is a thing. It is just like you're doing the actual physical work. You're actually experiencing the thing in a non-real reality. But our brain is it is the organ that does the physical lifting, whereas our minds do the reality lifting. I hope that piece makes sense. Now, onto the affirmation piece. you can do lots of visualization. And in those visualizations, you can see the if this, then that's, and that is a negative outcome. And so if you're not careful with those visualizations, you can start creating a negative spiral of not affirmatives, not affirmatives, or what is generally considered as positive affirmations. To Corey's earlier point of negative affirmations, we have to be careful with affirmation isn't just a general term. It can be sliced and diced many ways. So these visualizations can be a good thing as a positive affirmation if we're using that language, but you have to be careful that it doesn't spool up the other way.
That is a great point. Corey, what are you thinking on this?
I was thinking, obviously, with the neural pathways and the fact that the more we repeat, the more neural pathways we build. I think what it is it's by doing that, it allows our mind to react to a situation without having to think of it, because the neural pathway is already there. The more that we're doing that, the more, like as Jay said, all of a sudden he's judo throwing somebody down on the ground while he was cutting his grass. They're not connected. But because he'd done that so many times, he built the neural pathways, his body and his mind reacted before his consciousness understood what was going on. But back to sort of what Shaun was saying with the negative affirmations that you're having, I've seen it as well that people have to be cognitive of things like dreams as well. So if you are feeling crappy, if you don't think you're doing anything right in your life and you don't make that right before you go to bed, you're going to find at least one person in particular that I'm thinking of will have catastrophized dreams. And it doesn't matter what they do, they can't get out of whatever it is that's happening, a natural disaster, somebody attacking them, and they wake up and they feel exhausted. And they're just like, geez, it's like all they've done is be negative the entire night. They've just had bad things happen to them. And when they wake up in the morning, it's not, oh, geez, I had some nightmares. It's just, I don't know what's going on with my life. I feel completely powerless. And then that starts to affect the waking day, which then feeds into the night. And if you don't get into that positive idea of, you know what, bad things are going to happen, I'm going to be a savage, this is the way I'm going to be a savage about it, and start believing those things, you will manifest that. Even when you're sleeping, like I said, this is one particular person I'm thinking of, but you will manifest that and it will start affecting every facet and just feed into itself as that iterative loop.
I think what you're getting at here is it's also called like radical acceptance. This is one of the things that my doc and I worked with quite a bit, was the ability to accept what is for what is, and then manage what you can do from there. Because if you're, as you said, if you're catastrophizing or visualizing the absolute worst outcome, or catastrophizing, or any of the other verbiage that goes along with that, it's not so much that you'll make it happen, but you'll make it happen. it's a tough thing to engage without that radical acceptance, that ability to accept what is. What do you got, Shaun?
Well, there's another problem, the other extreme. So there's that catastrophization aspect, which, to Corey's point, can then become physically exhausting as you don't get enough sleep. And then it turns into that death spiral of it's hard to get out of that unless, there's a hard reset. But there's another piece on the other end of the spectrum that I see, which is like, I like to term it toxic positivity, where the affirmation is so freaking positive that it's kind of toxic. Because it's a trend that went on IG there about a year or two ago. Some dude would get in front of a microphone and say, I know you're struggling. I know you're doing great. I know you're trying hard. Bro, you don't know anyone. You're just kicking out those words to the internet, and you're kicking out the positivity spiel. I get it, and it's good, but temper it down, because you don't know who you're talking to, but you're giving it out so freaking hard that it can spool up into like a toxicity aspect of too much positivity, where you're talking to people that you don't know about things that you don't understand, but you're just trying to be a nice dude. You're just trying to put out so much positivity that it then becomes a toxic aspect. What do you guys see out there?
Yeah. Gunny, I'm going to come to you first. What are you thinking?
Well, I just want to hit on the, I think the negative portion of affirmation is really important, because you can be somewhat positive and execute and get on with life. But if you're negative at everything or have that victim mentality, you ain't pushing past the 0 point to start going into positive. Just quick jump story with a civilian. They wouldn't go out the door. He was last person, no big deal. Brought him back in, good to go. Get him on the ground. He's like, I don't want to do it. I go, obviously you came here today, you want to do this. So I said, this is a positive thing that you didn't want to go out the door. There's nothing negative about it. It's not cool jumping out of planes.
We lost you there, bud. You gotta. I think you muted yourself by accident there, Gunny. Okay, well, sorry, I'm not. I can't take you off mute here. You gotta somehow. I think you might have muted your own button. Let's jump over a little bit here, Jay. You got any thoughts on this before we?
Yeah, Tim can hear us. I don't know. Are you able to hear us, Tim?
Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll work with
Okay.
him. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Corey made a really good point, and it was kind of like the icing on Tim and Shaun's cake with consciousness. And here's the interesting thing about neural pathways and consciousness, and why visualization and affirmations are so important. Consciousness is up to 5 to 10 seconds behind what's happening in the real world in front of you. So if you think that you're going to get into a fight and be able to consciously create the scenario in front of you, you might already have your head kicked in before your consciousness realizes that you're going to throw the punch. So consciousness is this thing that experiences the neural pathways and the connections and what happens between mind, body, and brain. And if you don't have these visualizations in place, you're way behind already. It's too late already. If you're trying to consciously create it in the moment, it's too late. And so that was a great point, Corey, because it hadn't been brought up yet. Consciousness isn't the thing. Consciousness is just the observation of the experience. And so people have to realize that you can't just in the moment decide 4 or 5 pathways that you're going to take. It'll be too late by then.
Yeah, absolutely. Gunny, good to let's get you back on here. You were in the middle of a point, so I wanted to make sure that you get it across.
I got
No, I got you. You're good to go. You're good. Can you hear me? No? I'm hitting buttons. Moving on. Okay. Corey, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I've been there where Gunny has been with being unable to hear, so I imagine it's quite frustrating. He's probably visualizing several violent things going on with electronics in his life. We'll see if they manifest into reality here. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the visualization, I can go through it 100 different times. If I visualize being a bobsled driver, that doesn't mean that just because I visualized it that I'm going to be able to be a bobsled driver. I'm going to need to put that into action and create that muscle memory, that experience, that failure loop, like the idea, and I don't mean failure, but I mean, I visualize it, and I go and execute it, and it doesn't execute the way that I visualized it because of A, B, and C. And to touch base on sort of the toxic positivity, we've all worked with people that no matter how bad they're doing, no matter what is going on, they are positive. They're visualizing in their head that they're superstars. And it's like, you are not taking the world around you and putting that back into the loop. Visualize, but then you're screwing up. You're not doing stuff. Whatever it is you think you're executing against, you're not, and you're not putting that back. So I think we need to be cautious of that, of just constantly visualizing and thinking we have it. There still has to be that physical execution. There still has to be that experience. There still has to be that after action report where we're like, what worked, what didn't, and then put it back in so that when we visualize again, we're more accurate.
Absolutely. Now, we are running a little short on time here. Shaun, I'm going to give you a last thought on this, and then we'll go around the table and get some final thoughts. I'm going to continue to help Gunny see if we can't sort this out, but what are you're thinking on what Corey just said?
Yeah. Just that to Jay and Corey's point, you can't do visualization in a non-real world. You can visualize all day long, but you've got to put it out into the real world to pressure test your visualizations in order to retweak the next iteration of visualizations. Because as Jay said, our consciousness is behind the 8-ball already. It's our job to tighten up that time lag response, as Bruce Lee called it, and then try to get in front of the time lag response by doing your PFC, or your prefrontal cortex predictive modeling, so that before you become victim to the consciousness or the time lag response impact, you're predicting the moment before it occurs so that you're not behind the 8-ball. And that takes a lot of physical practice. It takes a lot of real world practice that then you reiterate through your imagined or visualized process. So it is a internal action pressure tested against an external reality that then is rejigged back and forth through this internal external modeling in order to learn how to either tighten up the timeline or do it more effectively or efficiently, depending on what you're doing that's immediately in front of your nose. So no visualization is worth its salt if all you're doing is thinking but not actioning.
Yeah, absolutely. As we always say, it comes back to action, right? Taking action. Now we are just a little bit over time, so I'm going to get some final thoughts. We'll start with Corey. We'll work our way down. We'll see if we can get Gunny back into this and go from there. Corey, what are your final thoughts on anything we've gone over so far today?
Anybody who's listening to this now or later, I want you to do that. I want you to visualize. I want you to visualize small things. It doesn't have to be big things. You know, we're talking about being in combat or being in a highly dynamic situation. Visualize small things. Start with that, because, you know, everything doesn't have to be January 1st, the gym bro going in and doing as many reps as possible with his heavy weight. All you're going to do is walk out sore and never want to do it again. So if you're sitting there for hours and hours and hours trying to visualize something huge, you're never going to want to do it. You're going to be exhausted. So start small, do the small things, do it for a while, at least a couple of weeks, see how your mindset changes as you move forward.
Absolutely. Jay, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just to carry on with what Corey was saying, because I think basically what he's saying is you got to have a bit of a reality check on this too. So you can affirm all you like, but if you're on fire and people are telling you you're on fire and you keep saying, no, I'm okay, you're going to burn to death. So there is a reality check, and we were really deep on this, but we didn't get a chance to kind of bring it back to affirmation. So the mind is a wonderful, powerful thing. In the same breath, the mind is a very dangerous thing if you don't know how to harness it properly. And Corey is absolutely right. It takes baby steps. You can't jump off a cliff and expect to fly, right? So affirmation and visualization is probably one of the most powerful tools you can use, because it can set your mind properly. But like Corey said, you got to crawl before you walk. You got to walk before you run. And so you got to take this with a grain of salt. You got to do your own homework and figure out how to properly implement this into your life.
Absolutely. Gunny, I saw you giggle at Jay's comment there. I know you can hear us, so
Yeah, I missed like 90% of what's going on here. I am not an
we're
IT.
at final thoughts though. So anything,
Not an IT
anything
guy.
at all?
What Jay said there, I like. You have to practice visualizing. You have to practice affirmation. It is something that takes reps, and positive reps, not just reps for the sake of doing it. And that's the way you will eventually perfect both systems.
Absolutely. Shaun, final thoughts?
Yeah, so the fellas are right. That's exactly what you have to do. But you're going to fail at that if you don't set the appropriate velocity. So it's been said, baby steps for some, massive leaps for others. And it all depends on where you are in the game. So if you choose the incorrect velocity for you, you will, after a week, stop doing all of it, because it'll either frustrate you, or you'll feel like you're screwing it up, or you're getting off the couch one day, but you're trying to be David Goggins the next day. You've got to find the right velocity for you on all things. Otherwise, you'll never play the long game. And it's the long game that produces results. It's the process that produces the outcomes. And so you have to be patient with yourself. You have to be kind of gentle with yourself, but not too gentle. You kind of got to push the pace enough that you start to see forward progress, but not push it so hard. Not try to visualize a million times before you go to bed today if you've never visualized before. Find the right velocity where it's not frustrating, but you feel like you're moving forward at the appropriate pace for you at the level that you're at right now. And if you don't know how to do that, which a lot of people don't know how, then go find someone who knows how to do it well. Ask around. Ask in your city. Ask in your digital city. Ask a coach. Ask any of the guys that are on the panel right now. All of them have got answers for you if you've got no answers currently. So don't be frustrated if you can't figure all of this out by yourself. Find a community that can help you figure it out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about this earlier in the fact that, I had a conversation with my kids at one point in time, and they were all like, I want to be an adult. And I was like, what the funny thing is about being an adult? You can do anything you want. And they were all excited. And I was like, what the problem with being an adult is? You can do anything you want, which it's a very similar cycle in this, and that, as everybody said, the mind is a powerful tool. And like any tool, can be dangerous if used incorrectly. And so it needs to be utilized well. And you can read a book, you can watch a podcast, you can talk to your people in your community, you can do any of those things to help develop the skill set that you want to develop. Now, I have a couple comments here. I just want to hit on these, and then we can shut it down for the afternoon. Or evening, I guess it is now. Karen jumped in here, said Zen meditation can be used for reaching any life goals, not just physical ones, visualizing and breaking down the steps to the smallest denominator to achieve financial goal, mental health goals. Absolutely, 100%. Lisa jumped in here, said, I thought I had missed the live tonight and came in to watch it live, which is perfect. And then Chris jumped in here, said, are you mind readers? You answer every question I am typing. So, good to go. We answered a whole bunch of questions without even getting them. Fantastic. First off, Jay, Gunny, Corey, really appreciate the conversation, and Shaun as well. And it's a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. This is such a huge topic. We need all night to get really deep into this. So I really appreciate you guys' thoughts, and all the questions and comments we've had so far has been fantastic. And I'm going to say continually learn, build, grow with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.